You want to know the shocking truth? The very apartment my husband and I lived in for the first 2 years of our marriage, the one his mother constantly criticized for being small, or not up to their family's standards, was actually mine. I owned it free and clear before I ever met him, and I kept that secret from him and his entire family until the exact moment I needed to drop that bombshell. And let me tell you, I did the right thing. If I hadn't, I would have been financially ruined and completely taken advantage of. The question is, after everything you're about to hear, was I wrong for keeping such a massive secret from the man I was marrying? Tell me honestly, would you have done the exact same thing to protect yourself? I need to take you back a few years to the time before Alex, my now ex-husband, was even a serious fixture in my life. I was 28 and a successful freelance graphic designer. My business was booming, and I had been prudent with my earnings. The market was a little soft, and I saw a fantastic opportunity to buy a beautiful 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom condo in a prime downtown location. It was perfect, spacious, modern, and close to everything. I paid for it mostly in cash, making the monthly costs minimal, and it was a huge point of pride for me. It was my sanctuary, my investment, and my proof that I could stand on my own 2 feet. I wasn't just doing well, I was thriving. I casually mentioned the purchase to a few close friends, but it wasn't something I broadcasted. I valued privacy, especially around my finances. This would become a crucial habit later on. It was right after moving into that apartment that I met Alex. He was charming, funny, and successful in his own right, or so it seemed. He worked as a sales manager for a mid-sized tech company, and he drove a nice car and always picked up the tab. Our relationship moved quickly, the way things do when you feel like you've finally found your person. We were inseparable after about 6 months, and soon the conversation naturally drifted toward moving in together. Now, here's where the secret started. I didn't want to sell my place, and I certainly wasn't going to move into his slightly cramped, rented apartment across town. My place was objectively better, so when he asked about a place for us, I simply presented my apartment as an apartment, a great opportunity that I had found. I told him the monthly mortgage and HOA fees were around $2,800, which was a fair market rent for the unit, but I never explicitly said that I was the owner. I made a point of referring to it as our place, or the apartment, always dodging direct questions about who signed the initial lease or where the down payment came from. Alex, surprisingly, never pushed. He just seemed thrilled to move into such a nice place. We split the $2,800 down the middle, a $1,400 payment from him every month, which he called rent, or his share of the bills. In reality, that $1,400 was pure tax-free profit for me, on top of the money I saved by paying off the bulk of the mortgage up front. It was a sweet deal, but it felt necessary, a small shield I was putting up. Why the need for a shield? Enter his mother, Diana. Diana was a force. She was a woman who believed that her son, Alex, was practically royalty and deserved nothing less than the best. From the moment she met me, she was calculating, subtly probing for weaknesses, and most of all, trying to gauge my financial standing. She was a woman of old money, which actually meant her husband had sold a modest business years ago, and she was terrified of losing the perceived social status that came with it. The first time she visited the apartment, she walked in, slowly surveying the beautiful space, and then made a face that was a perfect mix of pity and disapproval. "Oh, Alex, darling," she said, dramatically sighing and addressing him, not me. "It's adequate, but so small for a man of your ambition, and the view of the fire escape is just dreadful. Are you sure you can't find something better, something more us?" I gritted my teeth. The apartment was over 1,500 square feet and had a lovely city view, not a fire escape. But her subtle digs never stopped. She constantly talked about how Alex deserved an entire house, how I should be a better inspiration for his financial goals, and how they, meaning her family, had always lived in houses, never these cramped boxes. She had no idea the cramped box was a 7-figure asset. And Alex, he rarely defended me or the apartment. He would just nervously chuckle and say, "Oh, Mom, it's fine for now." That was the first red flag. The complete lack of a backbone when it came to his domineering mother. The next red flag was financial. Alex, despite his supposedly high-paying job, was terrible with money. He was always buying expensive gadgets, leasing a new car every 2 years, and generally living slightly beyond his means. He was never broke, but he was never solvent. He was always playing catch-up. I, on the other hand, was stacking cash. I saw his financial habits and felt a cold dread creep in. We got engaged about a year after moving in. It was a beautiful proposal, but the wedding planning was a nightmare, mostly thanks to Diana. She insisted on a lavish, over-the-top affair, suggesting I should cover the costs since Alex's savings are tied up in future investments. Another dodge. My family was ready to contribute, but I was firm. The wedding would be modest, focused on us, and we would split the costs. This decision earned me the title of the cheap one from Diana, but it saved me tens of thousands. During all of this, the apartment situation remained the same. I kept up the facade of us simply renting together. I never mentioned the property taxes I was paying, the equity I was building, or the fact that I was the one fielding calls from the HOA. I kept all of those documents in a locked file cabinet, separate from our joint papers. I convinced myself I was protecting us from Diana's meddling. But deep down, I knew I was protecting myself from Alex's financial recklessness and his family's entitlement. I started to see marriage less as a partnership and more as a contractual agreement that needed careful boundaries, and the ownership of that apartment became my ultimate boundary. The wedding finally came and went. It was lovely, despite Diana's best efforts to micromanage everything. We settled into married life, and the dynamics in the apartment shifted subtly. Diana started showing up unannounced more often. She'd inspect the kitchen, comment on the dust, and most damningly, she started making suggestions for improvements. She'd say things like, "Alex, you need to tell the landlord to upgrade this dishwasher. It's so old." Or, "When your next place has a proper entrance hall, you won't have this clutter." She still had no clue. She was treating my property like a cheap, temporary rental, which she felt empowered to criticize. Then the request started, and this is where my secret became a golden parachute. First, it was a suggestion from Alex that maybe I should cover the rent for a few months because his work was slowing down, and he had some unexpected debts to clear. I did it once, reluctantly, because we were married. The next time Diana was involved, she called me not him and said, "Alex is struggling. He's a good man, but he's having a rough patch, since you work from home and your income is so flexible." Her words for freelance, "You should take over the full $2,800 payment for a year. It's a small sacrifice for your husband's peace of mind." My blood ran cold. The audacity of her asking me to pay the entire amount to myself, while simultaneously believing she was asking me to cover a massive, recurring expense for their benefit, was staggering. I politely declined, saying I had my own large expenses coming up, which was true. I was paying a huge lump sum toward my business's retirement fund. Alex got sulky, and that was the second major red flag. He didn't defend me to his mother, and he was upset that I wouldn't bail him out of a hole he dug himself into. Over the next year, the situation escalated. Alex became increasingly moody, distant, and financially irresponsible. I found evidence of credit card debt he hadn't disclosed to me. He started borrowing money from friends. I was still paying the bulk of the bills, and he was barely contributing his share of the fake rent on time. I started seeing a side of him I hadn't noticed before, a deep, seated sense of entitlement, the belief that someone, usually a woman, should clean up his messes. This was clearly inherited from Diana. One evening, the conversation got heated. He'd been late on his payment again, and I confronted him gently. He snapped, "Why are you always so focused on money, Sarah? It's just a rental. We'll get a house eventually when my career takes off. You're worrying about $1,400 is ridiculous. Honestly, it's so typical of someone who always has to nickel and dime everything. Can't you just cover it for a while? I'm your husband." His words stung, but what hurt most was the dismissive way he referred to the rental. He saw it as a temporary placeholder, not a substantial asset, and certainly not my asset. He didn't respect the home, and he didn't respect my contributions to our life. This was the moment I realized the marriage was not built on solid ground. It was built on a series of assumptions, and on my part, a very large, necessary secret. I decided then and there that I wouldn't let him ruin me financially, too. I started quietly consulting with a lawyer, a family friend who specialized in asset protection, and they confirmed that because the apartment was purchased before the marriage, and I had been meticulously keeping my finances separate and documented, it was almost certainly a separate property. But Alex and Diana, in their supreme arrogance, were about to give me the perfect opportunity to deploy my secret weapon. So that's the situation I was in. I was married to a man who saw me as a temporary financial solution, and whose mother saw me as a walking ATM. I was sitting on a massive piece of secret equity, and they were treating me and my home with contempt. I had to make a choice: continue the charade and risk him somehow claiming a stake, or drop the bomb and end the marriage before I lost everything. Before I tell you what happened next, I want you to pause and comment below what you would have done in my shoes. Would you have let them continue to disrespect you in your own home? Or would you have revealed the truth? Consequences be damned. Let me know, because what I did next changed everything. The climax of this whole awful drama came on a Saturday afternoon. Diana was over, uninvited as usual. She was sitting on my sofa, drinking my expensive coffee and tearing down my life choices. Alex was sitting silently next to her, looking sheepish but not intervening. The topic, as it so often did, shifted to the apartment. "Sarah," Diana began, her voice dripping with false concern, "Alex and I have been discussing your living situation. This apartment just isn't working. It's depressing. It's time for Alex to have a proper house, something he can be proud of. I found a lovely 3-bedroom in a perfect neighborhood, and I'm willing to help with the down payment, but you two need to start looking at selling this rental and splitting the profit from your tenancy. It's the only sensible way forward." I felt a cold calm wash over me. This was it. This was the entitlement hitting its peak. She was not only suggesting we move out of my property, but she was assuming that because we were married and both contributed rent, Alex was entitled to a cut of the sale. She genuinely believed they had a right to the equity I had earned years before I met him. Alex nodded along, confirming her belief. "She's right, honey. We can probably get a good amount back. We've been paying rent for 2 years. Let's talk to the landlord about breaking the lease and selling. We can use the moving money." I set my mug down slowly. The clicking sound was loud in the sudden silence. I looked at Alex, then directly at Diana. My voice was quiet but firm. "There will be no selling, Diana, and there will be no splitting the profit from the tenancy, as you call it." Diana scoffed. "Don't be ridiculous, Sarah. You can't just keep the money when Alex has been contributing his half of the rent for 2 years. That's marriage, dear, sharing." I smiled, a small, genuine smile that didn't reach my eyes. "Oh, I completely agree, Diana. Sharing is what marriage is all about, which is why I won't be splitting anything, because there is no profit from a tenancy to split. There is no landlord to talk to. There is only me. The confusion on her face was priceless. Alex just looked bewildered. "What are you talking about, Sarah? What do you mean, only you?" I leaned forward slightly. "I mean this, Alex. I own this apartment. I have owned this apartment for 3 years, a year before I ever met you. I paid for the majority of it in cash from my business earnings. The $2,800 you thought was a mortgage/rent payment was simply the market rate. The $1,400 you've been paying me for 2 years was not rent or your share of the mortgage. It was the premium you paid to live in a luxury property I own." Diana's jaw dropped. She literally sputtered, trying to form a sentence. Alex's face went from confusion to a sort of dawning horror, then rage. "You what? You lied to me. You let me pay rent to you. You've been collecting profit off of me. How could you do that? That's deceitful." I stood up, feeling a powerful sense of righteous indignation. "Deceitful? Alex, you have been late on your $1,400 payment 4 times in the last 6 months. You have accumulated undisclosed debt. You have constantly put me down for being cheap while spending wildly. And you, Diana," I turned to her, "you have walked into my home every single week for 2 years and criticized it, belittled me, and most recently, you tried to orchestrate a way to have Alex walk away with a share of my premarital asset. I didn't lie. I withheld information because I saw exactly who you both were. I saw the entitlement, and I knew I had to protect myself. This is unforgivable." Alex yelled, jumping to his feet. "We're married. You're supposed to trust me. We'll just sell the place and I'll get my share." I shook my head. "No, Alex, the apartment is separate property. I have all the documentation, dated before our marriage, and in fact, since you failed to make your agreed-upon contribution for the last 3 months. And since you have clearly demonstrated a lack of respect for me and my property, your right to reside here is now terminated. You have 30 days to find a new place, and by the way, those 2 paintings you've always hated in the living room, I commissioned those. I own those too. Take only what is yours, which, frankly, isn't much inside these 4 walls." Diana, finally finding her voice, screeched, "You manipulative little schemer. Alex, we'll fight this. This is community property now." I walked to the locked file cabinet, pulled out a thick envelope, and laid it on the coffee table. "This is a letter from my attorney. It outlines the separate nature of the asset and serves as a formal notice of separation, based on irreconcilable financial differences and emotional neglect. You can fight it, Diana, but you'll be fighting a losing battle against premarital documentation and the very clear paper trail of your son's financial delinquency." The aftermath was exactly what I had prepared for. Alex left within 2 weeks, tail between his legs, muttering threats about alimony and divorce court. Diana threw a massive tantrum, calling every relative to tell them what a monster I was. But the truth was, I was the one left financially secure and emotionally free. The divorce was surprisingly quick. My lawyer easily proved that the apartment was separate property. Alex tried to claim he was owed back the $1,400 he paid me monthly, but we argued successfully that it was fair market value for a premium rental and that he had benefited from living there. Not to mention his recent failures to pay, he walked away with his car, his clothes, and a mountain of credit card debt that was solely his. Diana's attempts to interfere were constantly blocked by the legal team, and eventually they both faded into the background, nursing their wounded pride and their misplaced sense of entitlement. I stayed in my apartment, the one that was suddenly so quiet and peaceful. I finally felt safe. I continued to pay my minimal mortgage and HOA fees, reinvesting the money I used to collect from Alex into my own retirement fund. The secret wasn't born out of malice. It was born out of an instinct for self-preservation, and it turned out to be the smartest financial decision I ever made. It protected my future from a man who was incapable of building his own. I realized that a healthy marriage is built on trust, yes, but earned trust. And when that trust is consistently broken by entitlement and disrespect, your first obligation is to yourself. My initial gut feeling that I shouldn't disclose my assets to a man I didn't fully know, and who had a manipulative mother, saved me from years of financial entanglement and possibly ruin. I lost a husband, but I kept my financial freedom, my home, and my peace of mind. I have zero regrets about what I did. I protected my future, and I stood up to two people who thought they could take what wasn't theirs. The lesson here, for anyone listening, is that self-protection is not selfish, it's necessary. Never apologize for having boundaries, especially financial ones. That apartment wasn't just four walls and a roof. It was my independence, and I fought like hell to keep it. Like this video if you were on my side in this whole mess. And if you think I made the right call by keeping the biggest secret of my life until the perfect moment. Subscribe for more true stories about people fighting back against entitlement and manipulation. And seriously, share your final thoughts on this whole ordeal in the comments section below. What was the biggest red flag I missed? I'll see you all in the next story.